So I've selected cell A12. I'll go ahead and choose Pi, batch search. So let's go ahead and configure some cell references in this dialog box so that we're making reference to the fields that are stored on this Excel spreadsheet. One of the things we can do is we can make a cell reference to the name of the Pi server. So for example, by clicking here, I can go ahead and select right there, and that indicates that that's going to be the name of my Pi server, the contents of that cell. Now likewise, similarly, we're going to go through, and for all of these, batch ID, product, unit name, etc., we're simply going to make references to where you would find them in the spreadsheet. So the batch ID is going to be this unit that you see, or excuse me, this batch ID that you see right here. For the product, I'll go ahead and choose product. And for the unit name, I'll just choose this unit name right here. So we've essentially made cell references to these, and in return, every time we make changes to this, that's going to end up recalculating these batch results. Now for the start and the end time, we're going to specify the start and end time that you see in the spreadsheet. So my end time is going to be back 3 days, minus 3 days. And this start time is going to be this right here. And that asterisk stands for current time. And then finally, where are we going to put the results? Well, the default is to go on the cell that you first selected when you started this dialog box, and that is A12. But if for some reason you didn't start there, you can specify that now. There we go. We've got just about everything that we need to make this batch search work. If you go ahead and choose search, you'll be able to see whether you're getting any search results or not. In this case, I am getting a lot of search results. But I'm not ready to click on the OK button yet. I still need to specify exactly what we're going to output out to the spreadsheet. Oh, and one more thing. I could have easily hard-coded things in here, batch IDs. So for example, I could have put in, just typed in the name of my unit, digester 1. But I want to make this more of a search engine. I want to use this cell reference here so that when I make changes to this unit, we're going to see those changes populate the spreadsheet with a new set of results. Okay, now let's determine how we're actually going to store or put things on the display. We do that in the settings option. First thing we need to specify is how many levels deep we'd like to show. Now if I were to choose to leave this just at unit batch, then what we would see is essentially these unit batches here without any of the layers underneath that, any of the sub batches. So I don't want that. I want to put 2 different Pi sub batch levels. There are 2 sub batches or levels of sub batches in this particular example that we've configured in the Learning Labs. Now in this part of the exercise, this is really rather cheap, but what I'm going to do is ask you to specify that you put the levels or show the levels using indentation, and that is so that this will populate this spreadsheet in a fashion that I've already prepared it for. You'll notice we're making reference to some of the cells here, and if we don't show it using indentation, then our little exercise won't work. Well, it'll work, it's just that the references that we've made over here aren't going to be pointing to the right place. So we want to make sure that we're dumping this into the spreadsheet in a format that's going to work well with what's already there. Now remember, the only reason we're doing this here is because I've already prepped this template with some calculations, and I want to make sure that the output we have fits into the calculations that I've already prepped. If you were doing this from scratch, of course, you would choose this depending on your own preferences and then build a spreadsheet around that. But we're doing it a little bit opposite here. We're trying to retrofit these results to fit the spreadsheet that already exists. Now that's a little unrealistic, but for the purposes of this example, it'll save you a lot of the formatting and really the kind of grunt work that's got nothing to do with batch. That's really got more to do with formatting and other data link functions. Well, hopefully you'll see what I mean once we click on OK, because what we're going to see is the batch results are going to execute. It's going to be placed into this spreadsheet, exactly the way it works best for this particular spreadsheet. And the result is this wonderful little search engine here where all the configuration's already been done, all the calculations have already been done, and it all works, very straightforward. So what you were able to do right now is you did this retrieval right here, starting at, let's start at this point right here at this cell and stretching all the way over here to this cell right here. So that's where you finished your retrieval. Now all the things that we see over here, all these things are things that were pre-configured, and we'll explore those in just a second. So here are our results, and the big finish to this is now that I've got these results, I can choose different inputs, and by choosing different inputs we're going to see different results. And so now we're only looking at digester 1, or now we're only looking at digester 2. As you can see, the results change. Or if I were to change this to a different product, let's say it's the product that ends in, we'll go with asterisk 202. I don't think we're going to see any results for this. Let's see. No, we did find some. Yeah, these are all those that have a product ending in 202 with a digester 2. Okay, so the idea here is we have a nice little search engine, and we can use that search engine to do some restrictive searches. Now let me scroll over now and we'll explore the rest of this, these two things right here, these two results. Now this right here is a function that's using an if-then statement within Excel along with this alias-to-tag function to result in either showing me an alias name, or if no alias lookup works, then just showing me a blank space. But the alias-to-tag is critical here. What we're doing here, and we can look at this up here where it says the alias-to-tag dialog box. What it's doing is it allows us to provide an alias name and a module path, and what's going to be returned is a tag name. So in this case, the alias name is going to be this right here, this temperature. The module name is going to be the module that you see right here under unit. That's a module in the module database that's associated with this particular batch unit. Now, as I mentioned before, when we change things here, it changes the results. Watch what happens when the search results change from digester 2 to digester 1. Watch what happens to the alias lookup over here. I'll switch over to digester 1. As you can see, this module changed. This changed over here as a result, because with a different module it ends up finding a different tag. Now I would get similar results if I were to change the name of the alias. Instead of temperature, if I were to look at pressure, now we are retrieving a different tag. So we're mapping this module name to this alias name. Now, at the risk of belaboring the obvious, for those of you who get this already, let me show you how we made those alias connections. I'm going to go into the System Management Tools, and I'd like to open up the module database again so that we can take a look at where those aliases, pressure and temperature, were defined. So here's my module database editor right here under Operation, Module Database. And under these individual digesters, oops, wrong one, here we go. Under the individual digesters, you'll see aliases, pressure, and temperature. And these actually point to these tags, pp digest 1, pressure, oops, and here's pp digest 2, pressure. So it's the definition of the aliases here, that those aliases are defined within specific digesters, these units. It's that mapping that produces this tag that you see right here. So we're mapping this unit name to this alias name here, and as a result we get a tag. Well, once you have a tag right here in this column, and you've got a start time and an end time for a batch, there's really no end to interesting calculations you can do at that point, because now we can invoke some of our normal data link functions, like this calculated data function here that allows you to do a calculation, tag name, start time, end time, and then type of calculation. For example, I can do a total, an average, a minimum, a max, etc. And once you've got the start time, the end time, and the tag name, then we can do things like calculate what the average temperature was or what the maximum temperature was during that particular batch or sub-batch. And now this, let me scroll back again here. Remember, this is the unit batch. That unit batch went from 1223 to 1225. But as you can see, within that unit batch, there were smaller sub-batches. This went from 1223 to 1224. Within that, from 1223.15 to 23, from 1223.45 to 24.45, etc. We're drilling down through this hierarchy. Now, these are very, very short sub-batches here because, again, for the sake of the learning labs, we want these batches to be coming in very, very, very fast so you have a lot to work with. But normally these would be things that might be hours or minutes or days, just whatever fits your model. But in any event, the combination, and we think this is a very, very powerful combination, the combination of a start time and end time and a pi tag name gives you the ability to start doing calculations and comparisons. So I can look at the maximum, I can look at what the minimum was during this period. I can look at what the average was during that period between the start and the end for each of these. So what we've got here now is a nice little analytical engine we can use to find and compare things about batches. So for example, if you're making widgets in batches, there's probably, and there's some kind of a problem you want to research. Well, you probably know enough about that problem to find when you actually made that. You either know what unit it was made in, digester 1 or 2, you know what product was involved, you might know what the batch ID was. If the customer calls and says, hey, this batch on the shipping label was bad, you know that. Or you may simply just know what the start and end time or about when you made it. So if you know any of those things, and that any of these things can be provided as search criteria. And in addition, if you were to go back in here and choose to look at this batch retrieval again, as you can see, there are other things we could search for. Instead of for batch ID or product, we could have searched for procedure or for unit heading. So these are the things that we can, these are the types of things we can search for using this Pi BatchView add-in to Excel. So to summarize, we've got a nice little engine here where you can enter your search criteria right here. I can specify I want to see just those products that end in 201 that are involved in digester 2, and I get a set of results. These results that you see right here, these results are coming from BatchView. Now the next step is you can then choose what it is you'd like to actually see using these data link functions. So if I'd like to see pressure, that changes the alias, which changes this alias lookup result, and then the data link functions are going to return different averages or max or mins depending on what it is you've selected up here.